scholars, and all those who are gathered here for the third lecture of the online lecture series organized by the Scholars Circulī. When the idea of Scholars Circulī was first conceived, we were somewhat skeptical about the course and progress of the initiative. Nevertheless, it was founded with the objective of creating an intellectual platform for emerging scholars and to facilitate the dissemination of critical knowledge and academic dialogue. The overwhelming encouragement and scholarly engagement we have received throughout our lecture series has been truly inspiring, and we express our sincere gratitude to all academicians and well-wishers whose continued support has made the meaningful initiative enriching. In this regard, we are especially grateful to the speaker of the day, Professor Parimala V, who, upon hearing the objective of Scholars Circulī, graciously and readily accepted our invitation. Her encouragement, generosity, and willingness to support this initiative has been truly inspirational for all of us who are associated with Scholars Circulī. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our esteemed speaker, Professor Parimala V, an eminent historian and distinguished scholar in the field of history of education in colonial and modern India. She is currently professor at Zakir Husain Centre for Educational Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Professor Rao's research interests encompasses indigenous education, English education, educational debates, Scottish educators in India, colonial policies, missionary education, and national education. Among her most influential works are Foundation of Tilak's Nationalism, Discrimination, Education, and Hindutva, which was published in the year 2011. And another major work was Beyond Macaulay, Education in India from 1780 to 1860, in which she has brought to light one of the earliest modern Dalit voices through an essay which was written by a Dalit student in 1838. She has also edited the critically acclaimed volume New Perspectives in the History of Indian Education and co-edited the Encyclopedia of Modern Asian Educators published by the Routledge UK. Her latest work, Routledge Companion to History of Education in India from 1780 to 1947, was published in 2025, offers important reflection on British educational policies and question of social justice and representation. Through these significant studies, Professor Rao has critically explored the intersections of education, nationalism, colonialism, caste, and social justice in Indian history. Her scholarship, marked by the intellectual rigor, originality, and remarkable archival depth, has substantially enriched the historiography of Indian education. She has also served as a visiting fellow at the Institute of Education, London in 2011 and 2014, and is also associated with several prestigious international journals and academic bodies. Today's lecture, titled Social Justice and Scottish Offices in Colonial India, is truly the need of the hour. In a period marked by dynamic politics and constantly evolving intellectual and public discourses, it becomes increasingly essential for us to understand the historical nuances surrounding the questions of social justice, education, colonial administration, and reform. Such discussions enable us not only to critically interrogate the past, but also to reflect meaningfully upon contemporary debates and social realities. I would be absolutely right in saying that Professor Rao is among the foremost authorities on the subject. Her extensive and pioneering research on colonial education, Scottish influences in India, caste and social transformation has profoundly deepened our understanding of these complex themes. We are deeply honored to have such an accomplished scholar and inspiring academic personality amidst us today. I request everyone to join me in extending a warm and gracious welcome to Professor Rao. We welcome you, ma'am. Without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to invite Dr. Pramila to deliver her valuable address. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm really honored to address all the young scholars here. And thank you very much for inviting me to share my research with you. And it is a commendable job that Scholars Circulī is doing. And it is very much needed. Critical thinking is very much needed in the Indian academia right now. I would like to share my PPT. Okay. Thank you very much. And today I'll be talking about social justice and Scottish officers in colonial India. At any point in time, if you can't hear me, please let me know, because I have opened my PPT. I cannot actually see what is happening on the screen here. Now, so what can we call social justice in the colonial context, which is little problematic here, because there are various categories that come into the same space when we discuss about social justice. We have to look at the external contradiction and we have to look at the internal contradiction as well. External contradiction, very obvious. It is between the colonial state.
Sorry to interrupt you, Parimala.
Yes. Yes.
Do you want to convert this into presentation mode? Because the fonts are small otherwise.
I'm trying.
Slideshow mode.
I'm trying, but it is not happening.
This one, yeah.
Okay. Can you see?
No.
For me, it is presentation mode. Pardon?
No, for us, it's not a presentation mode.
Okay, for me, it is a
Ma'am, if you just click on the slideshow and then from the beginning up in
a
the
particular window you should be sharing the
Yeah, I have clicked on the slideshow.
No. On Google Meet, you will have this option to share. You choose which window to share, which screen to share. So that is where the problem is. So
it's visible only, ma'am. It's visible.
Okay.
It's audible also.
But you may not be able to read. That is the problem here. Now, is it okay?
Yeah,
can you read
okay.
it?
Yeah, ma'am.
we can read it, ma'am. We can
It's
proceed.
visible.
Okay. Sorry, I clicked something else. It went away. So I'll share it.
காஃபியா அப்புறமா வா சாப்பாடு கொடுக்க 8:40 வா எனக்கு 8:30 தான் இது முடியும்
Others, please mute your mic. Other participants, please mute your mic.
No, something went wrong. I'm so sorry. I'll log in.
Ma'am, presently slide is not visible, ma'am.
I know. Something has gone wrong. I'll just. I don't see my PPT. My PPT is open, but I cannot see it.
Ma'am, it's okay, ma'am. You can carry on, ma'am. You can continue. Continue, ma'am.
No, just without showing you and other things, it won't make sense.
Yes, ma'am, it's okay. PPT only not visible.
Yeah, that's what. I really don't know. Okay, the message I'm getting is this will allow you to take over from Scholar Circulī as a main presenter. So I click the present now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You can click. Yes.
Yeah,
You can.
that's what I have clicked, but then
Still, it is not visible, ma'am. Presentation
yeah,
is not
that's
visible.
what. Window I have clicked.
Ma'am, after
Probably
you
the
clicking that, you have to change the screen to
Initially it
presentation.
was
Ma'am. Go
opened,
to
ma'am.
that PowerPoint.
meeting host might need to give you any rights.
Yeah,
presentation
please see.
rights.
Please see. No, first time it came, but then after that I showing.
Ma'am, the other suggestion is that maybe you could send your PPT to them and they can keep changing the
Just a
slide
minute.
whenever they want.
You see now? No.
Ma'am, it's okay. You can continue. We can.
Just a second. Last try. Now it is not even clicking. At least I could click before. Just give me a second.
Ma'am, can you please share the presentation to the
Ma'am is out of
Scholar
the
Circulī?
meet.
Then we can.
Ma'am is out of the meet. Ma'am, kindly unmute, ma'am.
I have just sent it.
Ma'am, it is visible, ma'am.
It's visible?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am,
fine.
Yes,
present
ma'am.
it is visible.
Okay.
Please continue, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Just a second. Now, for me also, the font is very small now, but I'll try my best. Thank you, and I'm very sorry about this, technical glitch. Anyway, so we have to look at both external contradiction as well as internal contradiction. So the external contradiction was the British officials versus Indians. The internal contradictions was, the primary contradiction here was not the caste. It was the feudal lords and the common people. So the feudal lords, obviously from the upper caste, and most of the common people poor upper caste as well as the lower caste. So the division was like this, because as we go on, you will know how the social justice concept evolves and then how it is addressed. Of course, there is patriarchy and gender, which I'm not going to address today, because early part of 19th century, gender was not much discussed. It was the class as well as the caste. So now the question is, fundamental question is, can we apply theories of colonialism and imperialism to view the British and Indian interaction as colonizers and colonized? And regard colonizer as a monolithic category and colonized as monolithic category. As we know, colonized was not a monolithic category, and colonizers were also not a monolithic category. Let's look at it. All Indians as oppressed and all British officers as oppressors was questioned even during the British period. When Gandhi approached Ranade, M.G. Ranade, for support against the British rule, Gandhi told him that that we have to fight the British because British were oppressing Indians. So Ranade told him, see the landlords oppressing the peasants, turn the searchlight inwards. Gokhale also questioned at the height of nationalism, at the height of Swadeshi movement, that the argument for political reform or political independence before the social reform was something absolutely meaningless. He asked very point blank to Tilak, will a shoemaker ever be able to rise in India no matter how gifted he might be? So it was very much evident for many of the social reformers during the colonial period. Social reform was fundamental. It has to come first before India attained political independence. Now, the theories of colonialism and imperialism were essentially, prepared, I would rather say, because it was, thought of at certain point in history. Because Spanish colonialism was absolutely ruthless. When Spain gave independence, or rather when the Spanish colonies attained independence, Spain left behind 100% Spanish-speaking Catholic population. Whenever I say this, many people contest and they say, no, there is one tribe which doesn't speak Spanish. That one tribe, what is the population? Even if we look at the Spanish, the entire Latin American countries and Central American countries as well as South American countries, everyone speaks Spanish. So we can say 95, 98%, but then majority. And the indigenous religion, culture, language, everything was wiped out. When the British left India, only 5% of India's population knew English. I'm not saying English speaking. I don't use the term English speaking. English speaking means they'll be talking English, they'll be speaking English as mother tongue. Nobody in India speaks English as mother tongue. So they knew English, and only 2.5% had embraced Christianity. So there is a world of difference between various colonialisms, and one single theory of colonialism and imperialism cannot be applied to the British colonialism in India. Now, I would like to point out how ethnically and linguistically diverse Britain itself was. Spain was monolingual, monocultural, and monoreligious. France was monolingual, monocultural, and monoreligious, and most of the colonial powers were monolingual, monocultural, and monoreligious. Britain was the only country in Europe that was so divided on the lines of language, religion, and ethnicity. Just take a look at the language, just good morning. English is a Germanic language. I don't even dare to pronounce the Gaelic, terms for good morning. So it was this diverse. People coming from these diverse linguistic regions, diverse cultural regions, looked at India and the colonialism from a very, very different perspective. So today we are going to address the Scottish officers in India. How did Scots land in India? In 1600, when East India Company was set up, England and Scotland were two separate kingdoms. 30,000 square miles of Scottish territory most of the land was barren. Only 10% of the land was fit for agriculture, 13% was grazing land, and 3% forest. 75% of land did not produce anything. Scotland was an extremely poor country. So the Acts of Union in 1707, there were two acts, Act from the English side and Act that was passed in the Scottish Parliament, brought about a union of these two countries. But the people who negotiated for this union were middle class intellectuals, lawyers, professors, doctors, and heads of church. So they kept the control over education, legal system, and church even after the union. But not many Scots agreed. There were two massive rebellions, one in 1715 and another in 1745. It was crushed ruthlessly by the British forces, by the English forces. Most families lost at least one person. As a policy of reconciliation, soldiers in the East India Company, most of the Scots were recruited as soldiers in the East India Company. These were not, the Scots who were coming to India in the 18th and early 19th century were not businessmen. They were not coming to, amass wealth in India. Historian Bryant has said that soldiers' chances of making a fortune were non-existent. Whereas they ran a risk of early death from the diseases. Only economic desperation can explain their enlistment. In 1757, that is when British won the Battle of Plassey, most of the Highlanders spoke Gaelic, and of course the Lowlanders spoke Scotland adopted English as a medium of instruction from 1720s onwards. You should remember, for Wales and Scotland, English is the second language. It is not the first language. Eyrecourt, the commander who won the Battle of Wandiwash, complained that the Highland soldiers in the army did not speak English, and giving commands in the battlefield was a problem. After acquiring English education, the Scots did not lose their distinct national identity. Those born outside also became more self-consciously Scottish than their countrymen back home. They expected Indians to do the same, to have a strong cultural mooring and progress through English education. When the Scots promote English education, it is never to impose a European lifestyle, European culture. It is always to empower the population through English education. So in one generation, Scots overcame poverty and became leaders in scientific inventions and material progress. So they advised Indians to do the same. So in most of the times when the Scots write letters, when they create documents, when they write minutes, this point comes very strongly from most of the Scots. Now, I'm talking only about the Scots. Why don't we hear the English voices? Let's take a look at the two different systems of education. Scottish education system was egalitarian. Village primary school was linked to high school and to the universities. So the brightest boy in the village, irrespective of his status in the society, whether he is a shepherd's son, whether he is a school teacher's son, whether he is a landlord's son, could go to the university. So we find the first generation English speakers like Charles Grant. Charles Grant's family spoke Gaelic. Thomas Munro, he's a first generation speaker. Robert Shortreed, first generation speaker. Thomas Munro's family had already moved to Glasgow from Highland. So they spoke English. But still, for him, English was, you can call it as a second language, we can dispute about it. But he came from the Gaelic background, Robert Shortreed. So they spoke social justice in humanistic language. These people had limited education. Charles Grant had only primary education. Thomas Munro had gone to high school, but not to the university. Robert Shortreed, which is not very clear, but it is possible that he might have studied 1 or 2 years in high school, Edinburgh High School. Then we have second generation English speakers like Macaulay, Erskine Perry, and A.O. Hume. They were all university graduates. So there is a clarity about when they talk about the justice. Why we hear only Scottish voices in the archives? That is because education system in England was hierarchical. The rich went to preparatory schools, high schools, and universities. The poor went to Sunday schools. And beyond Sunday school, there was no way that they could go to higher education. Scottish shepherd boy could become a governor. We have the example of John Malcolm, whereas an English shepherd boy could not. So though English shepherd boy and a Scottish shepherd boy both came to India as soldiers in the army, one could raise because the quality of education was higher in Scotland than in England. So just a cursory look at the number of educators in 19th century India. Out of 21, 18 of them were Scots. So there is a very strong variable which we have to look at it. The other three, Charles Trevelyan was Cornish, which is a Gaelic-speaking area. Alexander Arbuthnot was Anglo-Irish. Francis Warden's antecedents, we do not know. We do not know his ethnic identity. So let us look at Charles Grant. Charles Grant's father took part in the Scottish Rebellion. He was orphaned very early. He came to India as a soldier. He witnessed Bengal famine of 1769 to 70, where 2 million people died. You should actually read his book to understand how devastating the famine was for Bengal. Villages were wiped out during this famine. In some villages, most of the adult population had died, only few infants survived. He gives a graphic description of that. And solution to this famine, he says, education, modern education. And he was also the first person to argue that education is the duty of the government. Until then, nobody had thought it was a duty. It was never thought as a duty in England, because most of the education, whether it is preparatory schools or high schools and universities, were private institutions. They were not owned by the government. So government never thought it had a duty to the society or duty to give education to the masses. It is much.
Ma'am,
Ma'am, hello.
ma'am, you are not
Ma'am,
audible.
your
Ma'am.
voice is not audible.
Ma'am is not.
It's not audible.
Ma'am is not. Let's discuss.
I'm really sorry. I don't know what is happening. Internet is very slow, so I have connected with my mobile. So, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, now we can hear.
It's perfect now. Perfect.
Can you see the?
No, ma'am. Presentation is not visible.
Yeah. I'm just sharing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and the slide is also visible.
Yes,
No,
ma'am.
It says
Visible.
Is it visible?
Okay, it says you are no longer
We're good,
presenting.
ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Where was I? I mean, till what
Yeah,
point you could see?
till
Okay.
Charles Grant's book, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the second argument of Charles Grant was that English educated Indians would discard practices like sati. So in the sati debate, he was the first to draw attention to orphans left behind the practice. Colonial state did not listen to him, and he went back to England, and there he became one of the directors of the East India Company and a member of British Parliament. So you can imagine an orphan from Scotland, because the quality of education was good in Scotland, could become one of the directors of the East India Company and a member of British Parliament. So once he became a member of British Parliament, he earmarked 1 lakh rupees for Indian education. So now there was a compulsion on the part of government of India that they have to utilize this, for education. But the colonial state did not use it until 1821. That's a different story. Now let us come to Thomas Munro. Thomas Munro came to India in 1780 as a soldier with a salary of 10 rupees without accommodation. And if he wanted accommodation within the cantonment or the government accommodation, then his salary would be 5 rupees. And Munro stayed outside. And this is also one of the reasons why Scottish soldiers and the clerks and the lower rung people were very close to Indians because they lived among Indians. They learned Indian languages because they were trying to save some money to send them back to England. Send them back to Scotland. So he became very fluent in Tamil and Telugu. So he was shifted to civil administration because he spoke the language very fluently. He could read and write, and he had developed very close relationship with Indians. Munro opposed Cornwallis and Richard Wellesley, who wanted to impose zamindari system upon the Madras presidency. So you know about the oppression of zamindari system that the people of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa endured. So I'm not going into the details, but he realized it very quickly, even when the oppression was not visible. So a 28-year-old Munro rejected Wellesley's proposal and independently creates this right-to-worry system in which every tiller, every peasant is owner of the land. Whereas in zamindari system, the land of the entire village or several villages belong to one person. He so vehemently fought against the most powerful governor generals, Arthur Wellesley, who became Duke of Wellington, who defeated Napoleon later. One of the very powerful families. His brother was a governor general, and Arthur Wellesley was a commander of the British forces in India. Told him very clearly, or rather warned him, you are unpopular among officials. When Munro did not keep quiet, he fought against the remaining governor generals also. As long as he was alive, he fought against them to defend Indian interests. If they had kicked him out of the job, if the British had relieved him from his position, his family back home in Scotland would have died of hunger. He and his brother Alexander, they were the actual breadwinners for the family. They had to save and send it. So for 15 years, he pitched tent outside villages at 45 degrees Celsius and measured land and distributed khatas, or distributed the ownership certificates. So for a Scotsman coming from the Scottish Highlands, which is a very cold area, it would have been very convenient for Munro to sit in collector's bungalow and then, just implement the Mindari system. No, he traveled from village to village. I do not think there is any village he left in these areas, the northern Tamil Nadu, the South Kannada district, which is known as Dakshin Kannada now, as well as the Siriat districts, or the entire Rayalaseema region. He went to every village, pitched the tent outside, and measured the land and distributed. So today we have the middle class in South India. We owe that to Munro. So we know about the conflict between Orientalists and Macaulay, which is very well known to everyone. Orientalists existed everywhere, in every presidency and in every province, and the Scots were fighting against the Orientalists. So the Orientalists were essentially British elites, and who had created a kind of an opinion about Indians. Indians are lazy, Indians are indolent, Indian peasants don't, produce much, and so on and so forth. So Munro, before the British Parliamentary Committee, says that Indian peasantry is as industrious as European peasantry, but they owe their poverty to their pre-colonial administration and colonial administration. He blames the British government in India also responsible for peasants' suffering. Now, another example here I would like to give is that Orientalist Francis Ellis, who started this idea of, separate Dravidian family of languages. And he was also one of the first person to talk about the Brahmins and, Sanskrit are, outsiders, and they are not into Tamil land, something, that Dravidian ideology has progressed. But how honest was he? He created this whole idea of Dravidian, family of languages. But he established the College of Fort St. George with admission open only to Brahmins and Mohammedans, with the intention of appointing them as law officers. So the admission was not open to all, the Dravidians. It was open only to Brahmins. He wanted to reserve all posts of law officers there. His successor, Rawlinson, actually brought out a proposal to reserve all government jobs to students of this college, that is, only to Brahmins. Munro opposed. He said government jobs should be left open to the whole population. He rejected the proposal. On 3rd July 1827, 3 days before his death, Munro proposed in his judicial minute, the trial of criminal cases should be handed over to the natives, as native jury is much better able to trace facts from evidence. Munro was also the first person to talk about independence for India. He said India has no political freedom, no voice in framing laws or imposing taxes. So introduce modern education so that Indians could enter the administration. In 1824, he argued, with what grace can we talk of our paternal government if we exclude natives from every important office? There is no insistence in the world of so humiliating a sentence having ever been passed upon any nation. Again, in the same year, he says the British rule in India should be temporary. This is 1824. Indian National Congress was established in 1885. 1820s, the Scots are talking about future Indian independence. He says, until the natives shall frame a regular government for themselves and to conduct and preserve it, whenever such time shall arrive, it will probably best for both countries that the British control over India should be gradually withdrawn. These were extremely radical, Scottish officers. So he proposed 300 Tahsildari and 40 collectorate, 300 Tahsildari schools at Tahsils, and 40 collectorate at the district level. But before his death, he could establish only 81 Tahsildari and 20 collectorate schools. So the schools were established for the people. So let us look at the caste-wise list of students. Purushavakam school, 10 Christian, that is native Christian, which means Dalit Christian, 21 lower caste. Madras Tahsildari school, 2 Madali, 1 Maratha. Madali are, what we today call, it was called as Madali in the early part of 19th century, 18th and 19th century. 1 Maratha and 30 lower caste. Ayapetta school, all 42 students were, recorded as low caste. Telugu school at Petta, 13 Brahmin, 13 non-Brahmin upper caste and 12 lower caste students. All schools were shut down after Monroe's death in 1827 as they had low caste students. People opposed. In 1839, a petition drafted by Gazelu, Lakshminarasu Chetty, Narayan Swami Naidu and Srinivasa Pillai and signed by 70,000 persons in English, Telugu and Tamil. And have a look at the size of the petition, which is preserved in the British Library. 70,000 signatures. But colonial state did not relent. It did not reopen the schools. 1830 to 1833, Britain witnessed reform debate. So the reform internally, and when that debate was taking place, 4 Scottish MPs, Joseph Hume, father of A.O. Hume. A.O. Hume had not been born at this time. He was born in 1829. He was 1 year child. Charles and Robert Grant, sons of Charles Grant and T.B. Macaulay, demanded that direct representation should be given to Indians in British Parliament. They argued that 4 MPs should be elected from India, 4 different provinces. There should be one from each province, that is presidency, Bengal presidency, and Madras presidency, Bombay presidency, and the North India, the 8 districts that were under the British. So 4 members of parliament should be elected in India, and they should go and sit in the British Parliament to argue their case. Here they start in the term justice, unjust, unjust and unjust. Charles Grant, that is the son of Charles Grant, argues we should acknowledge the political existence. It would be unjust to forget the existence of native from becoming member of. He's talking about the governance concept.
Ma'am,
Act of, yes.
Uh,
What happened?
can you hear me, ma'am? Yeah, it just broke away. It's fine now, ma'am. Continue.
Ma'am,
Ma'am, can you hear us? Hello, ma'am.
Bala, check with ma'am.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Give us just 1 minute, sir. We'll just get back to you.
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, sorry, Bala.
Ma'am, you're audible now, ma'am.
Okay. Sorry, there was some
Very good, ma'am. Very good.
connection problem. Yeah, sorry. So Macaulay's equality clause, it says no native of India shall by reason only of his religion, place of birth, descent, color, or any of them be disabled from holding any place, office, or employment under the said company. So does it mean that they were fighting only for the upper caste or the upper classes of the Indian society? Let us take a look at what happens. So Macaulay became a member of British Parliament at the age of 30. Macaulay comes from a very, very poor background. Don't go by his lord thing. The title was given to him to be sent to India as a law member. He did not have any land attached to it. He did not have any other benefit attached to it. Okay. So what happens when a poor Scottish person becomes a member of parliament? He introduces the most controversial Jewish disability bill. This was to give equality to British Jews who had no civil rights till then. Right to enter educational institutions, right to hold offices, and right to contest election. There were few Jews who had made a lot of money and they had become rich. Even they could not send their children to Oxford or Cambridge. They could not admit their children to any of the colleges. So the idea of secularism enters into the debate. It is not just the justice and injustice, but also the idea of secularism enters into the debate. Though the word secularism is not there, it came into existence much later. But the ideas containing, what we today call secularism emerges in these debates. So Macaulay fought against what he calls intolerant and absurd restrictions on Jews to hold public office. So he says that we should make Jews into Englishmen and members of the community by giving them equal educational and employment opportunities. So who is an Englishman? The British Jews are also white, and British, of course, are white. So what is he trying to say here? He defines an Englishman as a free man with rights. So anyone could become an Englishman, irrespective of the skin color, who will be free, who is not a slave, who has no restrictions, and who has rights. So in the course of the argument, there's a lot of arguments, a beautiful argument. I think you should, sorry, I'm sounding more like Trump. You should actually read the debates. It is so interesting. Many of the members of the, the British Parliament, they ask the question, England, Britain is a Christian country, and how can you allow a Jew to become member of the Parliament? If you allow that, will you allow a Hindu who worships 7 heads of a snake? So Macaulay says, except for the post of priests, rabbis, all positions should be open to all religious communities. He says a Jew cannot become a Christian priest cannot become a rabbi. But except these 2 positions, all positions should be open to all communities. So what else Macaulay was fighting before even coming to India? After the bill was passed and he was appointed as a law member, the first law member, he declared that it was his intention to get rid of everything that can be properly called slavery in India. He says judicial reforms are essential to prevent the British officers from treating all native population as pariahs. So Macaulay was aware of this term pariah even before coming to India. So he says the way the British officers are treating Indians, that should be prevented. That should be stopped through judicial reforms. So he goes on and he is appointed as a member, and he even declares in the British Parliament the day on which Britain gave its independence to India would be the proudest day in English history. These are the Scots who are tempting the British imperialism. They are questioning the British colonialism here. So he landed on 10th June 1834 at Madras, and he proceeds from Madras to Ooty because the Governor General Bentinck was staying at Ooty. And, he is head of the compulsory for him to travel to Ooty and submit his credentials. So he does that, and Bentinck's office selects a servant because Macaulay had not come to India before. So first time he was coming to India, he had no knowledge of any of the Indian languages. So they send him, they give him a cook cum servant. And that person's name we do not have in history, but only as someone who was from an untouchable caste. So Macaulay was given a Dalit cook and and who also acted as a servant. So the day they were supposed to, depart from Ooty to Madras, and from Madras they would take a ship to Calcutta. So this Dalit servant first left in a palanquin. He would go somewhere and then he would pitch a tent, he would prepare the food, and by the time Macaulay's palanquin would reach there. So even the servants in the British administration did travel by palanquin. As soon as this person's palanquin left, this Dalit, the servant's palanquin, the whole village descended up and wanted to kill him. He wanted to lynch him. So Macaulay hears the commotion and then sees through the window that this poor fellow is being attacked. He takes his ceremonial sword, rushes and rescues him from the crowd. So the first act of Macaulay when he comes to India is to protect Dalit with the sword, with lynch. So he proceeds to Calcutta, and the first two things that he does is that he abolished corporal punishment to Indian soldiers. When Indian soldiers made mistakes, they were flogged. Now they could no longer be flogged. The second thing was legislation to subject Europeans to civil jurisdiction. Now, what does it actually mean? It means that all Indians could be tried within the district, because there is a district court. But Europeans or from anybody from Europe, if they committed a crime, they could be tried only in Calcutta. So imagine a period when there were no trains, no buses, and one had to travel from Bukart to, Calcutta, which place they are in. For example, somebody might be living in Kanyakumari and a British officer might have, hit him, borrowed money and had not returned. There was no way that poor fellow could travel on a bullock cart or on a ship to Calcutta. And on the other hand, Macaulay says many British officers would threaten Indians that they would file a case in Calcutta, and these people were very scared. So he says if Indians can be tried in the local, the district, court, so should Europeans be. And the British officers, conservative British officers, were so angry with him. They organized meetings, they organized campaign, and asked, East India Company authorities to call him back to England. So now a bit about education. So Macaulay wrote 42 education minutes between February 1835 to December 1837. I'm not going to discuss the controversial second February. Anything wrong? Is everything?
No, ma'am,
Can you
please
hear
continue.
me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It is
Okay,
audible.
thank you.
Please continue.
Thank you. So I will not discuss much about the 2nd February 1835 minute, except that he wrote that harsh minute to prevent Arabic from becoming the medium of instruction in all higher educational institutions. It had nothing to do with English versus Sanskrit. It was to do with the very elite, the Orientalists, who wanted to introduce Arabic as a medium of instruction in Calcutta Medical College, as well as all higher educational institutions. This would not even help the ordinary Muslims also. Okay? So that education minute was to prevent Arabic from becoming medium of instruction. So one of the minutes, he talks about educational backwardness of, Bihar, and we have 2 education minutes regarding that, and he establishes a high school. So the first modern high school in Bihar was established by Macaulay in Patna. So let us look at the caste-wise list. The first batch consisted of 11 Brahmin, 1 Rajput, 10 Khatri, 38 Kayastha, 10 Baniya, 2 Gwala, 2 Kurmi, 5 native Christian. So unless otherwise specified, 5 native Christians, always Dalit Christians, and 33 Muslims. He dismissed as British schoolmaster for beating an Indian boy. He opposed Farrukhabad and Bhagalpur schools for not admitting poor students. He says that our schools should be open to all. No such distinction ought to be tolerated in any such school. He also opposed seating a Dalit boy separately in Agra College. So who was this boy? The exam results of December 1836. There were 77 students in that class, 10 Muslim, 63 Hindus. Out of 63 Hindus, we have one Sonar, that is OBC, and one Dalit student. And look at the result list here. English reading, Balamukund has stood second. Nicholas Patrick is an Eurasian, an Anglo-Indian student. Obviously, he would be talking English at home. So he stood first. Second position is Balamukund. Arithmetic and mathematics, the difference is arithmetic as it is, and mathematics consisted of algebra and geometry. Again, Nicholas Patrick. And second position is Ram Dayal, who was a Sonar student, who was an OBC student. English composition, history, geography, and natural philosophy. The second position is Balamukund. So here is a Dalit student who was one of the toppers of the class. In arithmetic and mathematics, is in 7th position. And Ram Dayal, the Sonar boy, the OBC boy, is in 3rd position in English composition, history, and geography. And he's in the 4th position in English reading. So Balamukund wrote an essay, and in fact, that was an essay competition. Every year it was conducted, and Balamukund's essay was considered the best essay, but the college refused to give prize to him, mainly because he came from a what we call miserable background. So here is a screenshot of Balamukund's essay. At the time, Calcutta archives did not allow us to take pictures. In fact, the same time, 2015, 2016, 2017, I was working in Chennai archives. They were not allowing us to take pictures. So this is something, like hiding. I took the picture, and I also promised them that I will not use it in publication or anything. It's only for my, students to show it. So look at the beautiful handwriting of Balamukund. And this is his signature. Okay. Now, I thought whether I should address this issue or not, because this is so widely circulated in the WhatsApp university. So I will not read this out. All of you must have seen it. It has been circulated for the past almost 20 years. Okay. I'll just go through point by point. What this picture says is Macaulay spoke about India derogatorily on 2nd February 1835. Macaulay was not a member of British Parliament, and he was in India. He was not in England at that time. Even in the 21st century, you can't be in London and Calcutta on the same day. The second point is, he says, the picture says, I have traveled across the length and breadth of India. Macaulay did not travel anywhere. He was busy drafting Indian Penal Code and did not travel when he was here. Third, I have not seen one person who is a beggar, one person who is a thief. 98% of Indians were poor. Only kings, nawabs, and landed gentry and some traders owned most of the wealth. Also, there is no stigma attached to begging, because one of the most popular or the most revered person who begged on the streets was Buddha, Gautama Buddha. He would not eat anything that is offered to him. It is only when he begged in the morning, whatever food that fell into his bowl, he ate. So there is no stigma attached to begging in India. Now, I do not think we would ever conquer this country. By this time, British had won 12 out of 14 wars they had fought in India. They had consolidated their position. Only Sindh and Punjab were yet to be conquered. So this statement is a figment of imagination of someone sitting in an air-conditioned chamber and concocting some Nonsense. And again, what the picture says, unless he would ever break the very backbone of this nation, which is spiritual and cultural heritage. Macaulay opposed the missionaries. And he says, I will punish anyone who hurts the religious sentiments of others. And that is the reason he included blasphemy laws in the Indian Penal Code. And because of his Indian Penal Code, because of these blasphemy laws, many a time the missionaries could not outrightly condemn Hindu religion. The next point, I propose we replace her old and ancient education system. Actually, it was Macaulay who sanctioned funds to William Adam to collect the data because he wanted to support the indigenous schools. He wanted to support the gurus. He made teaching mother tongue in all. Macaulay called his schools as Anglo vernacular schools, not English medium schools, Anglo vernacular schools. Teaching vernacular was compulsory according to Macaulay. What we want them, that is Indians, a truly dominated nation. And as I have already quoted, the day on which Britain gave its independence to India would be a proud day in English history. So, all the information that comes through WhatsApp, most of the time is wrong, is false, is inaccurate, and is ahistorical. Now let's go to the next Scottish officer, Robert Shortreed. Robert Shortreed worked in the presidency and he came to India as a soldier. Because he had a very good education, he became support staff to George Everest in trigonometry of India. Then he was appointed to a very lower position, not a collector, but head of the taluka, that is Purandar taluka. Okay. Shortreed argued as soon as he became, a minor official, taluka official in Purandar taluka, he immediately argues education is an empowering tool to protect people from corruption. He says that educated peasants would understand their own affairs, vigilantly observe and scrutinize the conduct of native functionaries, and successfully resist all unauthorized actions by seeing that the sum paid by them to the government were properly entered in the receipt books. It would be a powerful and operative check on native functionaries. He established 63 schools in Purandar Taluka in 1835. The schools taught Marathi, arithmetic, English, geography, and mulberry cultivation. Now let us take a look at the caste-wise list of students. We have peasant students, Kunbi students, 408. We have, Brahmin students, 338. We have the business community, 87. All these OBC has Sonar, Chimpi, Kas, Navdi, Sutar, Teli, Water. Sonar is a goldsmith, Chimpi is a tailor, Kasar is a coppersmith, Navi is a barber, Sutar is a carpenter, Teli is an oil presser, and Potter, of course, the homemade pots. 32 Muslim students, and we have 11 Chamha students, the Dalit students. And we have 3 Mahar Dalit boys and 3 Mahar girls. So we also see the Dalits were the first to send their daughters to schools. We have 1 Maung student and 4 Ramoshi are the tribal students. There were also small communities, consisting of 64 students. So the Scottish officers, it was not just Robert Shortreed. Of course, all the schools established by Robert Shortreed were shut down. All the schools established by Munro were shut down. All the schools established by Macaulay were shut down. All the schools established by Robert Shortreed. So wherever the Scottish officers had a voice, they were supporting martial culture. Seton Carr, who was judge of Jessore, says that we should, the village schools, we should set up a system of village schools that would enable a peasant to write letter of business, to draw out bond, to understand the terms of mortgage, to cast up his accounts, to know his receipts for rent are correctly signed. John Peter Grant, who was again a Scottish governor of Bengal, supports Seton Carr, and he wanted the curriculum of rural primary schools, besides teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, should consist of agricultural and commercial accounts, quittance of rent, bond, modes of formal letters. The above course will enable a lad of ordinary intelligence to read and write correctly and see that he is not cheated in his accounts by Mahajan or moneylender or the agent of the Zamindar. So wherever the Scottish officers were there, they were supporting this. Now let us take a look at Thomas and Perry. Thomas and Perry's father, James Perry, was a radical, Scottish journalist who stayed in Paris during the French Revolution and covered the events for the British press. He was also imprisoned for writing against the British government. Perry came to India in 1841, and there's a small, background story to it. In 1827, Western India or Bombay Presidency came under the British in 1818 when they defeated the Peshwas. Between 1818 or 1819 until 1827, many Indians wanted the British to establish English medium schools. Many Scottish officers wanted the British to establish English medium schools, and Francis Warden fought continuously with Elphinstone to establish it. They did not. So when Elphinstone was leaving Bombay, returning to England, the people collected 2,26,172 rupees. This is more than double of the education budget for the whole of British India, which was 1 lakh at the time. So the government was unhappy. They avoided establishing the school, the college. And finally, it was established when Robert Grant became the governor in 1835. Between 1827 to 1835, the money remained with the government, but they did not establish. George Jervis, an Orientalist, closed down this college as soon as Grant died, because it contained only lower class students. So at the time of shutting down this college, closing down this college, let us look at the number of students we have. We have Prabhus, the upper caste non-Brahmin, 95, Brahmin 75, OBC 66. Baniya is a business community, 18, Khatri 14, Maratha 2, Rajput 2. We don't find a single Dalit student here. We find large number of OBC students. When Erskine Perry came, he reopened the college. In 1841, 41-42, he reopened the college. So we find the first batch of students passing out of Elphinstone College. We find Dadabhai Nauroji there. And we also find Dadabhai Nauroji working in Elphinstone College as a professor for some time. So let us look at the first, officer we are discussing here, A.O. Hume. As you know, Joseph Hume had also worked in India for some time, and after that he had returned to England. He had become a Scottish MP. He was kept on arguing that the Hindus and Parsis are as intelligent as many members of the House. He opposed James' question: if 29 people want to roast and kill, roast the 30th, would the greatest happiness principle work? So he rejected utilitarianism of James Mill and others. Joseph Hume held landed aristocracy as oppressors and recommended the reduction of allowance to Prince Albert. This is the husband of Queen Victoria. He recommends the British Parliament to reduce the allowance from 50,000 pounds to 21,000 pounds. He also pointed out that the Queen's civil subsidy of 385,000 pounds could provide for 18,000 families. So he was fighting not only on behalf of Indians, he was also fighting against the aristocracy and the landed gentry in Britain. He was intimidated. A.O. Hume records, while growing up, he had seen his father being intimidated, privately threatened with prosecution. And he says, my ideas consolidated at the time, I resolved. I still cling to the political creed of my father. Like my father before me, I am a radical. So Hume came to India, some slight problem with the slides. Anyway, Hume came to India in 1849. He became the collector of Etawah in 1854. Within 1 year, he established 181 schools. And he argued with the Orientalist H.S. Reed that I will put within the reach of every talented lad, however poor, the attainment of a first-rate education. He also set up the state. In English it was called People's Friend, in Hindi it was called Prajahit, and in Urdu it was called Riya. Even asked, why should our children remain idle all day, every week, because it happens to be a festival with you? The school committees voted against the admission of children of butchers, tobacco sellers, and untouchable chamas and bhagis. So there is also conflict between the school committees who refused to admit these four categories. Hume said there cannot be any caste discrimination. If these students are not admitted, if the students from these communities are not admitted, then we will not set up schools. So finally, they had to yield, and a compromise was within the school, there would be a separate class for these four categories. Tobacco sellers, many of the tobacco sellers came from the, the business community. Legally, they were upper caste. Because of their occupation, they were pushed to the lower caste status. So the schools that Hume set up, look at the number of castes. Almost all castes are represented. Of course, Brahmins and Thakurs and Baniyas are majority here. But we also find a large number of the artisanal caste, that is OBC caste, and untouchable caste also. And their percentage, the number of inhabitants there, and percentage to former, to the latter. Number of students, the percentage number of students here. Schools thrived even during the revolt of 1857. When the revolt started, 10 days before the revolt started, there were 7,000 students. And when there was no British administration, people still protected the schools. They also contributed 1,10,000 rupees for the repair and the salaries of the. And when he went on leave in, during late 1861, Hume was transferred out of the Etawah district. While living, he donated his entire life savings to one school that survived, that is Central English School at Etawah, and invested in government bonds to cover the cost of maintenance and scholarship to poor students. He was removed from many posts for insubordination, that is, becoming very close to Indians and opposing the colonial state policies. Finally, he retired in 1882. Hume realized that scattered individuals, however capable, however well-meaning, are powerless. So to promote mental, moral, social, and political regeneration of the people, he wrote an open letter to the graduates of Calcutta University to build a strong Indian nation. And because of his letter, it was his letter that prompted a large number of people to come together to establish Indian Congress. He also established the British Committee of Indian National Congress, and the influential British officers called him a traitor and demanded the government to deport him. He returned in 1894, and in his farewell speech, he said two things. Please promise me two things. He said that I've been in India for over 40 years. I have served you people, but the thing is that I want to. One is remove child marriage and educate every boy and girl in the country. Between 1894 and 1912, he campaigned in England and spent thousands of pounds on behalf of Indian National Congress. So, what do I conclude? I mean, how do I conclude this? Scots fought with the Orientalists for social justice. They introduced radical Scottish radical ideas. They argued that everyone, irrespective of caste, religion, had equal access to education and employment. They also argued intelligence and competence and does not belong to any particular caste or ethnicity. Peasants and lower caste should be given education to equip them to fight for their rights. Every Indian should have English education to compete with British for government posts and attain future independence. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a very interesting lecture, which broke the narratives in Indian education history. So we will open the forum for questions. You can either drop the questions in the chat box or you can raise your hands and ask yourself.
Also, we would request everyone to mute your microphones, please.
Please, other participants, please mute your mic. We have some stuff. Yes. Yeah. Are there any questions? If participants has any questions, you can unmute your mic and you can drop your questions.
Can I ask something?
Yes, sir.
Parimala, this is
Please.
Amol. It's very
Yes,
interesting presentation and more elaborate than I heard, what I heard from you last. So it clarified quite a few things to me. What always makes me curious is these examples come from Western India, South India, and to some extent from Central India. What kind of similar instances are found in Eastern India, in Bengal presidency?
Bengal presidency, they do talk. That is what the Setankar and Grant, the two British officers, they talk about it, but they are not able to implement anything. Here, they are able to implement for a short period. Monroe was alive, his schools were, but Macaulay located in Calcutta, so it's Bengal presidency. So schools after he left India. So they were also talking the same thing across wherever their location was.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Now over to Bala. Yeah. Ritika Sharon, yes. Has raised your question.
Good evening,
Raised your
ma'am.
hand. Yes.
Yes, sir. Good evening, ma'am. You
Good
said
evening.
Britain is the only country which is multi-ethnic, multilingual, and multi-religious country. From your point of view, what is the reason for that?
Because communities were geographically isolated to an extent, and secondly, Britain became democratic, and this is a controversial thing, very early on, because Britain was the first country to have a parliament, and the power of the kings were limited continuously from the 13th century onwards. So the kind of, bringing all the people into one particular framework, whether speaking the same language or having a single church, etc. This is a very European phenomenon. So that did not happen in England. They allowed the languages to continue. So they made English hegemonic. If you want to go to a college, if you want to go to a university, you have to know English pretty well. But they did not impose. People continue to speak their mother tongue. Even today, the Welsh speak well. The Wales speaks in a Welsh language. It is democracy.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
There is one thing I missed because of the slides were this thing. I just wanted to share this particular slide. Can you see? So
Yes.
some of the slides went up and down, so I missed this one. See, Perry also talks very highly about Indians. And he's constantly fighting with George Jervis, who argues that natives are incapable of learning English or understand Western knowledge. So they will be at best promiscuous crowd of English smatterers. Perry argues that all Indian students, including the lower caste, could understand and express their thoughts in English. So to prove his point, he conducts a competition in 1850. And the competition was judged by a body of British officers. And who wins the essay? It is an OBC student, Narayan Bhai, of Kasar or Coppersmith caste. His essay is excellent. And it's a 16,000 long essay. It's an excellent essay. And Perry got it published. He was so impressed with the essay, he got it published and carried a copy with him back to England when he returned. So the only copy available in the world today is in Perry's file, Perry's papers, Esca and Perry papers. So I have reproduced that entire essay in this volume. I can't show you the volume, I suppose. Yeah, this volume, the 16,000 word essay. So, and it is a beautiful critique, an excellent critique of colonial education system. Here is an OBC boy who criticizes the British for not implementing modern education across the country.
Ms. Teresa Joshi, you can ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, ma'am. Thank you for such a very wonderful presentation. So, my question is mainly like these kinds of Scottish officials or officers, they were mainly the product of Scottish Enlightenment. So I just wanted to ask you this, like, what is your take, like all these kinds of interventions, even if they did with like good intentions, don't you think that these are all the requirement for a very convenient sort of administration? Like scholars like Avril Powell or like recently Joshua Eldridge, all of them turn these kinds of questions into scholar officials categories. So what do you think, like how these kinds of official mandates and how these are like driven by not just curiosity, but also kind of urgent requirement by these officials? Thank you.
It was not required for the British administration, to teach English to Indians. They were very much against teaching English to Indians. I have a paper on geopolitical policy. You can go to academia.edu and download it. So the British wanted to keep, what I mean is a colonial state wanted to keep Indians as ignorant as possible. So it is the Scottish officers who are fighting against it. It was not requirement of the administration. Most of the administration want the people to be ignorant. Because intelligent population, intelligent people will ask questions. No state wants to be questioned. So it was not a requirement. We can dismiss it off as, because they were British, they were white, they were, the colonial masters. Why was it necessary for Monroe to go from village to village, measure the land and implement right-to-worry system? No need. He could have risen to a very high position if he had complied with the state or the elite officials or the governor generals. They fought. And many a time when I read their rebuttal of the colonial state, I do not know whether a Scotsman sitting in Glasgow or Edinburgh writing against the British, or a Scottish officer sitting in India writing to the British, opposing the British on behalf of Indians. It's very difficult to find out. Only when I find the word natives, I know, okay, he is talking about India. So that opposition, the fundamental opposition they have with the English rule, they consider Scotland as a colony of England. So they are fighting at two levels. One as Scotsman opposing the English in Britain, and as Scotsman opposing the colonial state in India.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Ms. Rafael Velangani, you can ask your question.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for a wonderful presentation today. I had an opportunity to go through your book, New Perspectives in the History of Indian Education, edited by you. And exactly my thesis was along Dalit education. And certain points today you presented were mind-blowing, and you also bombarded the myth that white people are Britishers, all of them are like monolithic, ethnic people like. But you just changed that perspective, ma'am. Thank you very much. And only one question: have you found any data related to this Madras Presidency education of Dalit communities? Mostly covered East,
No.
West, like that. Thank you, ma'am. No.
I have covered Madras Presidency. I have a long chapter in Beyond Macaulay on Madras Presidency. There's a long chapter. But most of the time I am writing about the early 19th century or mid 19th century. But by the time it comes to the late 19th century, we find the Dalit students in the classrooms. But then there is also opposition to the Dalit entry of Dalit children into the classroom. So both the things we come across. I have a long chapter on Dalit education in my Routledge Companion, which deals with the admission of Dalit students across India. So there is also data on Madras Presidency. But Madras Presidency had an advantage. That advantage was the Dalit Christian students were the first to enter schools and colleges, and then the Hindu Dalit students. So by the end of 19th century, you find Dalit Christian students in colleges. And when the girls, were appointed as teachers, mostly women teachers were Dalit Christian teachers. Because they could go to the missionary schools and they could get education. So those aspects were there. And most of the, North India didn't have this.
So, ma'am, there are 3 in the chat box. Can I read it to you, ma'am? Yes. Yogesh Mani, research scholar from Madras Christian College.
I can't see the chat box. Please read it out to me.
I'll read it to you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. This is a question from Mr. Yogesh Mani from Madras Christian College. He is a research scholar, and he has 2 questions. How do we distinguish between the personal intentions of Scottish officials and the structural effects of colonial apparatus served? So this is the first question, ma'am.
It is difficult to distinguish between the two. Only when we take Scottish office actually implemented or did or argued, you can see the difference. If you don't read Thomas Munro's personal letters or his minutes, then, like he also was part of the British army, he also fought in the wars, and he became an administrator. You can see only that aspect. So we need to take everything into account, and then many things I could not discuss today because of lack of time. The way the Scottish officers were fighting with the Orientalists, and it is the Orientalists who shut down the schools established by the Scottish officers. In fact, very early on, in the late 18th century, there is a comment by one of the conservative English. If a district is administered by a Scot for any length of time, then no Englishman can administer it because they are so close to Indians. Scottish officers very close to Indians, and they completely quite democratic. You can't impose your rule on that district. But what happens by the middle of 19th century is that they introduce the colonial, in Britain, they introduced Indian civil service. Actually, the Indian civil service was discussed in the early 1830s when Macaulay was a member of British Parliament. He rejected it because only those who studied Greek and Latin could, write an exam, because Greek or Latin was compulsory there. He says, why don't you make a tribal language compulsory? At least the person can be posted in a tribal area. What is the use of Greek and Latin? And the intention of the British state was to keep these four Scots out, because in Scotland, Greek and Latin was not compulsory. So all the poor Scottish boys were coming to India and becoming governors and becoming high officials. The ones who were close to Indians. How do you stop? You can't actually, because you got entry in India. The best, cleverest way is to introduce Greek and Latin in service. So you hardly find Scottish officers post 1860. Radical ideas that you find is only in the first half of 19th century, not in the second half of 19th century. In fact, Evo Hugh was the last batch who came to India without writing this Indian civil service. Then all the people who came, the officials who came, were all products of either Oxford or Cambridge, or Englishmen. So the number of Scottish officers declines considerably in the second half of 19th century. What is the second question?
The second question is, does individual moral constraints within an exploitative system change the nature of that system?
Well, yes. If we have a South Indian middle class today, and more number of people own the land, then say, for example, UP or Bihar or Bengal, it's, we owe it to one person, Thomas Munro. He could change the system. Individuals could make a difference. Any other question?
Yes, ma'am. There is another one question. It is by Ms. Shakti Sri Tangaraj. She has asked that, could you explain the difference between the London Missionary Society and the Scottish Missionary Education System? So this is the last question, ma'am.
Okay. The London Missionary Society was essentially an English missionaries. English missionaries in India refused to teach English. Okay. Because they thought that English should be exclusive, because if Indians learn English, then they will start reading the radical European philosophies and they will not convert to Christianity. It was the Gaelic-speaking Scots who insisted on English education. So we have Madras Christian College, we have Scottish Church, college in Calcutta, and we have Wilson College in Bombay Presidency, who were the pioneers of English, the missionaries. They had to introduce English at some point of time because the Indians would not send their children to school. So under compulsion, they introduced. There is also a problem. When the universities were established, they introduced matriculation examination. For matriculation examination, the students had to study Shakespeare's plays. English missionaries refused to teach because, it's not according to the Christian principles. Shakespeare was opposed by the missionaries. But then they had to eventually, start teaching Shakespeare, because otherwise the Indians would not send their children to the schools, because they wanted the children to pass the matriculation examination and then go on to the universities. So this is the difference between the English missionaries, whether it's Baptist or London Missionary Society or any of the denominations, and the Scottish missionaries Scottish Presbyterian missionaries was this. They were willing to teach English to Indians, even if they become radical, radicalized by European radical philosophy. For example, Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was a very popular, writer in India at the time. The Indians who were learning English through informal mechanism were buying Thomas Paine's books, and missionaries were horrified by that, because Thomas Paine's Age of Reason reject the religion itself. The Scottish officers were Scottish officers and Scottish missionaries were the only ones who said that it is all right. Let Indians learn English, and we can always debate with them on theology. English missionaries were not. That's the difference I find between the two.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for patiently answering all the questions.
Thank you.
And it was a very interesting question and answer session. So this is the main objective of the forum, to make historians interact on different levels. It was very interesting to put forth the questions, and ma'am has patiently answered it. So now I request Bala Subramaniam to share his gratitude. Bala.
Thank you, Michael. Am I audible?
Yes, Bala.
Yes, Bala, you are audible.
Yeah. Just yeah. So I am deeply thankful for this opportunity to present the vote of thanks today. I first thank the Divine Almighty for, giving such an opportunity for all of us to come here and discuss about various historical topics. I would also like to thank Professor Parimala ma'am for graciously accepting our offer. The moment actually I asked ma'am, she didn't even think for another second. She just accepted the offer, and she's like, you guys are young scholars and I will definitely support you. So thank you so much for that, ma'am. Really means a lot to me. And also you have helped me a lot in my research with regard to Scottish missionaries. So thank you so much for that as well, ma'am. I would like to also thank Professor Madeline Gracie Augustine from Madras Christian College. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the support that you have given us. I would also like to thank the faculty from the Department of Social Work from the CSSW Tura campus, Meghalaya. I would also like to thank Professor Binora Sherin from Tura Government College. Thank you all for your support. As always, we would like to encourage various such discussions in our forum. If at all you are interested in presenting, do let us know. Do email us at scholarcirculi@gmail.com. We would be glad to host you. And also our lectures will be conducted every second Saturday of every month. So thank you so much for such a wonderful time. Have a great weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Bala, for inviting me. And this presentation was not one of my best presentation. I have a very bad sore throat. I did my best. This is not my best presentation. That much I can say. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, ma'am. Pleasure is ours, ma'am. Thank you so much.